Okay, so today, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I just today I wanted us to look into DCP server configuration. So I didn't have a lot to write here because DCP server is just self-explanatory. So this DCP server is just tasked to provide dynamic IP allocation. So that device that provides us with the automatic IP addressing or allocation is what we call DCP server. So basically we can configure DCP server in several ways. By the way, several ways, not just the two that I've written here. I did this before when I was starting. I didn't complete writing this. So we can do DCP server in various ways, and we're going to learn a lot, all of them. So the first way we can do it on a router. The second way we can do it on a switch. The third way we can do it on a firewall. The firewall will come last. So the third way we can do it on just a dedicated DHCP server device. Uh, and finally, we can also do it on the firewall. Yes. So we can either do DCP on a router, layer 3 switch, or dedicated DCP server device, or firewall. So we can choose where we want our DCP server to be allocated. This is not all. There are a lot of ways that through which you can implement our DCP server. But for the case of packet tracer, we are just going to use only these four. You can also use Active Directory as a Windows server as your um, DCP server. So in the packet tracer case, we are only going to use the router, layer 3 switch, the dedicated DCP server device, and the firewall. So the first class should be able to cover the router, the layer 3 switch, and the dedicated DCP server device. And maybe although I wanted this to come last when we're doing the firewalls, but if we find time, we'll do it, although it will come later when we're doing the firewall. So I might skip it in this session and do the three, which are very, very important at this level. So without further ado, just let me begin DCP server device, DCP server configuration on the router. So I'll need a packet tracer here, and let me just write here as DHCP server configuration. Okay, so I just paint it. So for the first case, which is a DCP server on a router, DHCP server on a router. So that's our first case. We use a router, and at this level we normally take this 2911 router. So we need a router and we put it there. Then we need a switch. We put it there. Then we need let's say computers. Maybe let me do this first. I turn them to DHCP, I turn the IP addressing to DHCP. So as you can remember, previously we've been doing static IP configuration. So in this case, we're just going to turn them to DHCP. You check another one. Let me use 4 in this case, and I turned all to DHCP. We've been using static. Now I'm going to turn them to DHCP. Also in this case, we turn them to DHCP. All right. So what we do now is just to connect. We just do the connection very fast to save time. Okay, so what we're going to do in this case, although in the next class I'm going to expand on the DHCP server configuration plus VLANs. In this class, just a basic DHCP server configuration. In the next class, we're going to learn how to do VLANs, inter-VLAN routing, and the DHCP server, because the three normally goes hand in hand. So in this case, we're not going to touch anything on the switch because we don't have VLANs. Whenever we have VLANs is when we're going to touch anything on the switch, something on the switch. But being that we don't have any something like VLANs, we only enable DHCP on the computer. So we just put here DHCP, and that's all. Our main concern is here, is on the router. So yes, so our main concern is on the router here. We click on the router, come to CLI, you'll find this dialog, just say no. And now we are in the router's interface. We just begin our configuration. We just enable config. All right. So the first step is to identify that probably, let's say this was our IT department. Let's just assume that this was our IT department. This was our IT department. IT department depth, and we want the network here to be net to be 192.168.1.0/24. Let's just assume this way that was our IT department with the network listed there. So when you come to the router, the first thing you do, you check on the connecting interface, the interface of the router that is connecting our LAN here, that's connecting to the switch. The switch is connecting to our computers, forming LAN, local area network. So check on this interface. You check on it, you find it's gig 00. So the first thing you do, you come to gig 00 interface, gig 0/0. Then you can see it's still red, meaning by default, routers interfaces are in shutdown state. They are shut down by default. So it's upon us to turn them up in order to use them. So we just say no shut, and that's all until they turn green. All right. The next step is to assign this interface an IP address, and that IP address should act as the default gateway of this connecting LAN. All of these computers should use IP address of this interface as their default gateway. So how are we going to do that? How to assign it? How to assign gig 00 IP address? We first check which network is this one. It's 192.168.1.0. So the default gateway should always be, it's not a must, but we normally in my configuration, I normally recommend that you use the first available host, which can be 192.168.1.1. So we assign it 1.1. So we just say IP address. Remember, we are still on gig 00. So we say,
Come again. Come again.
where did you get lost?
You said like I lost when you went inside gig 00, then no shutdown, then I didn't understand the rest. Sorry.
Okay, so I was saying that the first step that you do after creating this topology, you assign, you turn this computer to DHCP option. After turning, don't care about this one first because you not configure DHCP. So you turn them to DHCP option, and we can decorate the way I've done, and you give it maybe this was IT department. You give it the name of the department plus the network. After giving it the network, you come to the to the router, and you check this connecting interface of the router, which we found as gig 00. It is in shutdown state by default. So turn it up. How
Okay.
do you turn it up? You just say no shutdown. You negate shutdown. So if you negate shutdown, it comes up. After doing that, we now assign it IP address. And the IP address that we are going to assign it should act as the default gateway of this department, of IT department. So you can see that the network is this one. So the default gateway should be something like 192.168.1.1. I will normally recommend that we for practice purposes, we just use the first available host IP address, which is 1.1. Yeah. So
Okay.
so this one should take 1.1, like IP address. We are still on gig interface gig 00. Or I can just exit and enter it again. Interface gig 00. Then we assign it IP address of 192.168.1.1 and a subnet mask 255.255.255.0, and you hit enter. Exit. Now we've done with that phase. So now it's a phase to begin DHCP server configuration. We are going to use this router as our DHCP server to assign these computers IP addresses. Right now, if I move over these computers, you can see there's a very strange IP address listed there, 169.254.35 or something. That's called a PIPA, Automatic Private IP Allocation. Okay, or the link locals, something like that. Yeah. So let's begin configuring DHCP server on this router. How do we begin? The first thing that we do is to enable that service. You know, in the olden days, long time ago, the service was not enabled in some routers. So it's always a good practice to enable it first. Although in these new routers, they come they come with that service pre-enabled. So just for practice purpose, let's enable it again, although it's up. So we just say service DHCP and you hit enter. This command here will enable DHCP service on this router, although it's enabled by default in these new routers, but the old routers, you had to enable them, so it's enabled by default. Yeah. The next step after this one, you check on which department you want to configure DHCP server for. We want to configure for IT department, so we create what is called pool. So pool consists of a lot of things. Pool of things, maybe items of things. It consists of a group of things. So you configure a pool that is called IT. So inside the IT pool will consist of IP addresses that will be allocated to IT department devices. So we create what is called DHCP pool for sorry,
Something went wrong.
I can see that. I can see that. I'll share again. Yes. So I was saying that we create pools. For example, this is IT department. So we create DHCP pool for IT department so that that pool should be responsible to provide IP addresses to IT department devices. So we go to this router and now we create pool. How do we create pool? We just say IP DHCP pool. And which pool do you want to create for IT department? So we just say IT hyphen dept, something like that. One word, not two word, one word. IT dept, like that. And you hit enter. We've created pool IT dept. So this pool should contain IP addresses that should be assigned to these devices. So what we do, we just give, we just specify this network here. The network was just a network to be 192.168.1.0 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, and you hit enter. The most important part here, the most important part here is the default gateway. You have to give a pool default gateway. For example, this is IT pool, IT department pool. So that pool should have a default gateway, and that default gateway should be the IP address of the router interface that connects to that department. So the default gateway of this pool should be IP address of this interface, which was IP address of gig 00. So IP address of gig 00 was 192.168.1.1. So we just say default router, something like that. Default router, default gateway, same thing. 192.168.1.1, and you hit enter. So here also you can give DNS server address, but not a must. The only thing that's a must is these three. You have to give a pool a name. This was IT department. It had this network we have highlighted here. So the default gateway should be IP address of this interface, but optionally you can give
the IP. Okay, so the should be the IP address for the router.
This interface that connects to this this department here. It was gig 00. You can see it we configured here.
Yeah.
So that should be the default gateway of this pool, because we want all of these computers to use this one as their default gateway. So we specify it in the pool. You understand that? Yeah. Okay. So optionally, it's not a must. You can leave it or you just do it. You can configure DNS server. For example, just say DNS, just like that server. Let's use Google. Google is always 8.8.8. And you hit enter, you exit, and you do right. And we are now done configuring DHCP server. If you go to these computers, let me just go to that one, and you can see it has picked IP address 192.168.1.2 with the same subnet mask. So I just do it again, and the default gateway, you can see it's here. DNS server, you can see it's 8888. If I come back to this computer, you come back to static and refresh it again, it will pick with all the parameters. You can see 1.3 subnet mask, default gateway 1.1, and DNS server 8888. So Most importantly here, we normally, we can always tell the DHCP server that don't auto assign these types this number of IP addresses. Let's say we want the DHCP server not to assign any IP address from .1 to .10. How do we do that? We create what is called DHCP excluded addresses, because maybe we've assigned our let's say there's a printer in the company and we've assigned it a static IP address. So when we assign it a static IP address and we don't exclude, any another device can take that IP address when the printer is off. But when the printer comes up again, it finds that its IP address that was given to it has been taken. So the printer will not be able to communicate in the network. So we have to tell the DHCP server, please don't assign these IP addresses because we want to reserve them. How do we do that? So we just write this command, IP DHCP excluded addresses. So we just write, let's say we don't want to assign it from .1 to 10. So 192.168.1.1 space 192.168.1.10. So this command will tell DHCP server, please don't assign any IP address in this range from .1 to .10. Please don't assign any host this IP address. Then I hit enter. Do right. So currently, if I go here, you will see that the devices are still having something like .2. This one is having .3. If I hover over it, .3. This one is having .4. This one is having .5 because they have not refreshed their IP address. So if I come back to static and come back to DHCP, it will take from .11 because DHCP has been told not to assign any IP address from .1 to .10. So I will do it for all of this very, very fast. Okay, so if I move over this one, it should take .12, 1.12, you see, 1.13, and finally 1.14. So from 1.1 to 1.10 is reserved, and now you can use it without any conflict in the network. So maybe if you have any problem here, so that I can explain further before we move to configuring DHCP server on the layer 3 switch, or the multi-layer switch, or the core switch. Is there any question there?
For some point, DN server, like you said, like if I got you, so for those like all like we do use like the IP address for the router, and at the point of a DN server, when I use DN server, I couldn't understand why should we use again the same.
I can't. Where are you saying DNS server?
Yeah, right there.
Okay, I said here you can write your DNS server. DNS server is used to resolve host name to IP addresses. So if you have any DNS server in the network, you can write it there. But if you don't have, you can even write this one. It will still work. It will still work. But what's a must here is these three. In this setup, there comes a time when this one will be a must, and we must specify to the right DNS server when we shall be configuring DNS server. Now, when we shall have been configuring DNS server, we will give the DNS server IP address. So that IP address that we're going to give DNS server is what we'll put here. But what's a must in this case is this one. For the DHCP server to work, you have to do that. The three in this case. But DNS server, you can put it as this one. This one is for Google or anything you like. In this
Okay,
setup.
that means that is you can use that for like randomly 8 or that's the universal, that's standard.
Well, that IP address is for Google, so you know Google can resolve that. So I just use it randomly for Google from Google.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. In this setup, it's not a must. In this setup, it's not a must. There comes a time when it will be a must, and we will check on it. We'll look on into it. Yeah. So, do you have any other question?
I'm good, I'm good.
Okay.
So let me see. Slow down. DNS server DHCP exit. Slow up. Go down.
Then
Mhm. So under the network over there, the network you will put one
you put this, the one that
default
is here.
route. And
Yeah.
the default router
Yeah.
1216811. Okay.
You done?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we move to layer 3 switch. For layer 3 switch, just click on the switches and you choose 3650 switch. So I'll just do this, copy, paste. Okay. For layer 3 switch is very easy. We just do the same. We just connect them. You can connect them directly or via the switch, via switch. You can connect,
Okay.
yeah, you can connect them directly or via switch. But you know, I don't want that kind of direct connection because um, let's say the interfaces might be exhausted because in any department we might be having more than 50 devices, and for this switch it has only 24 ports, so it cannot connect those 50 devices. So let's just use another switch.
Mm.
You can just use another switch there, switch I mean, and you connect them. This one is a bit challenging, so this is where we're going to include interval routing here now a little bit, but we'll expound on interval routing when we do the next configuration, maybe tomorrow. So
1 second, bro.
Yes,
That's why I'll keep
you can see
muting.
my screen, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so I was saying that there are two ways to configure a DHCP server on a multi-layer switch. The first way is to do it way how we did on the router, and the second way is to do it using intervalent routing. So we need to understand both ways, and I'll start with the first way. So we need to configure uh, these computers. Let me turn them to DHCP very very fast. Okay, as we said that there's nothing we're going to do on the switch as per now until we get where we do intervalent routing. So this is where most of the things are. And remember, this is a layer 3 switch, multi-layer switch. It can perform both routing and switching at the same time. And by default, it's just a normal switch. So we need to make it to have routing capability. So the first thing you do, uh, you click on the switch, and when you come to CLI, you get this error. When you get this error, just click OK and come back here and drag AC power supply and plug into any available port. So if you come back, you can see it's loading. So we just give it some 10 to 15 seconds so that it can load fully, and you see it's as loaded. All right, so how do we configure multi-layer switch as DHCP server? There are two ways, and let's start with the first way. The second way we'll do next when we are doing DHCP server plus intervalent routing. So here, the first thing you do, just say enable, then enable config T, and then the next thing you do, this is a multi-layer switch, so it's just a normal switch. So let's make it a switch plus a router. Let's enable routing capability on the switch. How do we do it? We just say IP routing, and that's all. We've now enabled it to have a routing capability. So let's check on this port. Which port is this one? We check on this port. This is gig 101. So we enter gig 101. Gig 101 is the interface connecting to our HR department. So we just enter interface gig 101 and you hit enter. Then remember, these interfaces, these are just switch ports. This was a layer 2 switch. This was a layer 3 switch. We have enabled routing capability on this router. On this switch, it can now route packets, but the ports are still layer 2 ports. They are not layer 3 interfaces. We cannot assign them IP addresses. So if I try to assign IP address here, you will see IP address 192.168.20.1 255.255.255.0. You will see I get this error because this is still as, although it's a can you hear me?
yeah. It keeps crashing. I don't know if it's not working. You can start by here. I don't know if it doesn't. If it's
Okay.
not working up there. Yeah, I
Oh,
don't know.
oh. So let me check on. We should finish on this. It will take me only 10 minutes.
I don't. Yeah, but it keeps crashing. I don't know.
Where did you get me last? Can you remember?
Oh, you when you just started it for after you came back, it's just crashing. It,
Okay. So by that time this one was not there. Okay, so this is how it was by that time. So I will start again. So we said that we're going
Can
to,
you share the screen?
oh, haha, it's still disturbing today. So we said that we want to configure intermittent routing fast way, how we did on the router, but now we do it on the layer 3 switch. So we just click on the layer 3 switch, we come to CLI, and when we see receive this error, we just click OK. We come to physical tab and we drag the power supply. And now when you come back to CLI, you can,
I think it's crashed before you get there.
yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
when so you can start off for the second the second way you were saying we don't have to do anything from the switch, then it's crashed. So I don't know when you get all this. Okay.
Okay, the same way I said that we don't have to do anything on this switch, it's the same way we are not going to do anything on this switch. So all the configuration are done here. This switch is only for connecting our devices. We don't have any business with this switch as far as configuration are concerned. It's only used to provide connection. So all the configuration are done here, not here, not on this switch. This is just like a channel, provide the bridge to to connect these devices to this switch. So like I said, when you come to this switch, you just say no, and now we begin configuring DHCP server. It's just similar of what we did here, but there are a few different things that we need to understand. The same thing we did here is the same thing we're going to do here, but on layer 3 switch, there are things that we need to enable before we do what we did here. So the first thing, enable config T. We need to check this interface of the layer 3 switch that is connecting to our HR department. So this interface is gig 01. So interface gig 1/0/1. So we are going to assign IP address to this interface. But remember, this is just a switch, a layer 3 switch. We've not enabled routing on this switch. So the first thing we do, we enable routing on this switch. So let's just go back, exit, and say how do we enable routing on the layer 3 switch. Just say IP routing. That's all. We've just enabled routing on this switch. But this interface is still a switch port. It cannot be assigned IP address. So if I can just say interface gig 101 and assign it IP address, let's say 20.112.168.20.1 255.255.255.0 and I hit enter. You can see we have this error. Why? Because this interface is still a switch port. It's still a layer 2 port. Let's make it a layer 3 interface. We can only assign IP address to a layer 3 interface, but not a switch port. So let's make it a layer 3 interface. How do we do that? We just issue a command that is called no switch port. When we issue a command that is called no switch port, it will turn immediately to layer 3 interface. So we just say no switch port and hit enter. So you can see it was turning down first, then it came up. Now we can assign the IP address that it has just rejected. So if I just do that, just say IP address, that one, exit. But make sure you turn it to a layer 3 interface first with the no switch port command. Then you assign it IP address. Because if you don't turn it to a layer 3 interface, you won't be able to assign IP address. Alright, so let's configure DHCP server like this, like what we did on this side, or like what we did here. Now let's do it here, because the initial stage we've passed. The first thing we do, we create a pool. We enable the service first. Don't forget, we enable service DHCP. Suppose it's disabled by default. Okay. All right. So the second step, we create the pool, HR pool, DHCP pool for HR. Just say IP DHCP pool, and we want to name that pool as HR pool, HR department. How you like it. Now we assign this network to be 192.168.20.0, 255.255.255.0. Then default gateway should be, default router should be this IP address. Default router to be 192.168.20.1. Then DNS can be what you like, even this one, no problem. You can use 192.168.20.1. Exit. Then we want this switch to assign IP addresses from .11. So we want to reserve from .1 to .10. So we just say IP DHCP excluded address to be 192.168.20.1 space to 192.168.20.10 and we enter and do it. So if I come here to these computers, they should be assigned IP addresses from .11. You can see they picked previously, so if you can just refresh them, they will pick from .11. Default gateway is there, DNS is here. Also for this one, you can see .12, also .13, and finally this one should be .14, 15 there. Yeah, so that's the simplest way to configure DHCP server, both on the router and the multi-layer switch. So in the next class, we should be able to configure DHCP server plus inter-VLAN routing. That's where most guys get confused when they're doing projects, because they don't know how to configure DHCP server plus inter-VLAN routing. It confuses a lot of people. So tomorrow we should check on that, so that we can finish on DHCP server configuration before we move to other topics.